Hi, I'm Celia McBride. Welcome to Communion. Today we will be communing with Jerome Stueart, teacher, writer, singer, science fiction aficionado, doctor of English, American expat,
yes,
and son of a preacher man.
and alien. Yes.
Welcome, Jerome.
Thanks for having me, Celia.
I'm so excited you're here.
Me too.
So you told me that your father was a Navy officer and then became a Baptist preacher.
Yes.
Did he ever tell you about his calling? Because that's a radical shift in vocations. Did he ever talk about that?
No, I don't know that he did. I only know that our family, I know that he left the Navy after 20 years of being in the Navy. He went into the Navy at 17, and so 20 years later, he was needing to do something else, and I don't think it was like, you know, busboy, soda shop, preacher. And I don't think it was like that, but I think there was some sort of calling, but I don't remember him talking about that. Right. No.
Right.
But it was quite a shift. But if you think about it, being a pastor is just managing a large group of people, and he was an office manager when he was in the Navy. So it was kind of a similar thing, but with more of a you still get your directions from above,
right?
From the Navy commander or God. I mean, I guess that would be very similar, but I can't really speak for what the calling part might have been.
Right.
So.
And what was it like being raised by a Baptist preacher?
My dad's first choice wasn't preacher. He went into real estate first. He did a stint in real estate, and it didn't go well because they were cutthroat. And he didn't realize that, and so he went into seminary and took a seminary degree, and we became janitors for about 2 years while he was going through that.
Wow.
And then we went from janitors to the pastor. We were cleaning the church, and then we were preaching in the church. So lowest position, highest, I don't know if it's lowest position, because janitors are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the transition was all of a sudden, I guess your family is, you know, being in a preacher's family, his family becomes his resume in some ways, because what your family does indicates how good you are as a father and as a preacher and as a Christian. So I think, you know, everybody would agree with me that pastoral families or families where you're involved with a religious figure of some sort have a really high standard to follow.
So were you under pressure to?
I don't know if I felt it.
Be good.
I don't know. I don't know if it would have been any different had I been, you know, just going to church. The pressure of church was, you know, in the Baptist faith, you know, you wanted to make sure you were doing everything right and feeling the right emotions and feeling as saved as possible. I make it sound really cheap, but it's not. You register so much of your faith based on your actions and your feelings that there's not a lot of, if you have doubts, it's a bad thing. So you run around assuaging your doubts in some way, in whatever way you can. So I think I rededicated my life, which is what kids do around when they're in teenage years. They like, you know, any thoughts that they might have that might be bad, they're like all of a sudden going, okay, I need to rededicate my life to God because obviously I'm thinking some bad thoughts here. Right. So I think I did that several times just to make sure, because there's a fear. I grew up with just a bit of the hellfire and brimstone. It was just passing when, you know, my dad was not a hellfire and brimstone pastor, but we knew hellfire and brimstone pastors, and we went to them sometimes. And they would give the really hard sermon that you would be frightened to death of, you know. So that kind of fear lingers, like the smell of brimstone.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get anywhere near it, so you're constantly making sure you don't go to hell.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to gauge that. There's not like a little meter on you going, nearing hell. So, but you feel it. So if you're not, we went to church every Sunday night, Wednesday, and I believe Tuesday or Thursday, I'm not sure. So it's 4 times a week. And of course, my dad being the pastor, we were heavily involved in every project that was going on in the church. So, you know, that was our lives.
I actually think that so much of that fear carries over even into people who are not raised in faithful communities, because I wasn't, and yet somehow I
You've got a bit of it too?
Yeah.
You can smell the brimstone from there.
Exactly. I think, you know, we live in the Judeo-Christian culture.
We do.
At least in the first world here.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to take on that fear of the vengeful, punishing power that makes us feel bad about ourselves. And, you know, if I'm not a good girl, I'm going to be punished for it. If I'm a bad boy, I'm going to go to hell. And so I wonder how you, as a person of faith and as an adult who's matured and found your own way in the world, how much of that still clings to you, and what do you do with your doubts, and what do you do with your fears?
I want to go back for a moment before I answer that and say that I have really fond memories too. I mean, I didn't grow up in an abusive household. I didn't feel like the church abused me at the time in any way. I have very fond memories of, and I still love, even carried into adulthood, I love singing the hymns. I love being in church. I love that time where you come together with your community once a week to meet and do things together and learn together. I like the community of people who are helping each other. That's when church works. It's about people helping each other on the journey, because everybody's got a journey. Nobody wants to be alone. Churches are there to be that community of people helping you along and telling you you are not alone. Yes, we have God, but the physical manifestation of God is us, and we are here for each other. And when it works, it's amazing, and it can't be replaced by any club or any other group out there. That feeling of being together on an epic journey, not just your own personal journey, but you're all together on something huge. And your question, I think, was what carries on after that through adulthood. And I think what carries on for me is that desire to be within a Christian community or a community of people who believe the same way. I don't want to, since they become kind of foundational beliefs for me, like that there is a heaven, that there is a God, that and that I interact with Him on a regular basis. I want to touch base with people who have that experience too, but I also don't want to forget the experience of being in a room full of people all singing and enjoying ourselves. And I don't know if there's another place in the world where you get to sing once a week the same songs or a collection of songs together, and you're not being trained for a choir. I mean, there's just, I don't know if there's any other place where you get to sing joyful songs, hopeful songs, usually, about, you know, about how difficult life is, but dadgummit, we're going to make it. You can only get that, I think, in church. And that singing, I think, actually makes you feel the hope. So, blah, you're just really singing it out, and you can, hope just comes up. On the flip side, the fear of checking in with God to make sure you're not on a bad path lingers a bit too much sometimes. You know, you're still wondering if you've got it down, or if you're on the right path, or if you've got the signals correct. And that's the hard part, I think, of being an adult, is that when you're a kid, these stories in the Bible guided you, and they're amazing stories. I love the Bible stories because they're like flash fiction, but they've got a meaning to them. They're all about 1,000 words long, recurring characters sometimes, but they all go through amazing. I mean, David and a giant. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy elements in the Bible, and it's cool. I love thinking of the Bible as fantasy literature because you've got a God figure who is in the Bible interacting with humans, and that's like the basis of fantasy, is working with the spiritual realm in some way, either through magic or something. But, you know, I think these stories are incredibly powerful, and to me, they're true. They really happened. And so I hold them true, but sometimes they can feel very distant, like not my culture, not my story, and how do I adapt to a 21st century world? Where are the stories that are set in this time? And that would be an interesting Bible to see as a 21st century collection of interactive God with man tales that show, I mean, it'd be very interesting to do a North American version of that. But anyway, just making sure that you're not screwing up your life. I think that's something that follows everybody, is that, did I choose correctly? Am I stuck on one path? Is there one destiny for us, or are there multiple? Can we jump off a bad path to a better path? And making sure that you're hearing God. I think that's something that stays with most people who have grown up in church, is knowing that God is there, but wondering how accessible and how much you're really hearing, and making sure that you're doing as much as you possibly can to listen. So
I think that's really key, actually, for people, again, not just of faith, but you know, people who are non-believers, or who are afraid of this idea of, like, if I say I believe in God, it means that I'm religious, or that it means that I believe that the Bible's literal, and so, but I think, you know, a way that I like to speak about the idea of God, or the idea of higher guidance, is oftentimes through intuition, and, you know, listening to that inner wisdom, and so when you say listen, I think that's a really, really key piece into this human journey. But often my experience with talking with people and sharing with people and listening to people is, even that, there's even fear in that, because I'm afraid if I listen, I'm going to hear something that I don't want to hear, and so,
take everything you own and go to Africa.
Right. Yeah. So it's, again, just that piece of having the courage to listen, having the courage to go within and find out, am I on the path that I'm supposed to be on? I think it's a big question, and you know what? Not everyone's willing to go there and answer those questions.
And I think even Christians, I think, you know, a majority of people who go to churches too are those people who know they're supposed to hear God, but haven't heard Him very often, or not in the way they want to, and they react in fear and they stick to the rules. It's almost as if the default is the rule book. If you don't hear God, stick to the rules, that will guide you. But even then they'll say, stick to the rules as interpreted by a figure that you respect the authority of. And then, to me, one of the basis of Christianity is you get a personal relationship with God. You get to take that book, that sacred book, and say, what is that book saying to me? And the Baptists believe in a concept called the priesthood of the believer, where you don't have to go through an authority figure to get truth and meaning out of the book. You can do it yourself, but I think a lot of people default to the authority figure because the book was written a long time ago, and it's very hard to interpret. And everyone's afraid of getting it wrong. So that's where we get a lot of churches that are bound in the religiousness, the religion part of it, and less on the faith. Because when the faith goes to a place where we've never been before, then we're frightened. And I don't know about you, but if you read the Bible and the stories inside there, these things never happened to these people before. They're all new. You know, burning bush never happened to anybody before. Whoa, what is that? That's new ground. You know, all of these things are new ground, but for us, it has to be old ground. Like the rule is, there's no more new ground almost. That all the ground has been done. It's in this book. You can only learn from that. That's not the way that God interacted with human beings before. So I think everything's new ground. I think everything is new and exciting and different and discovery and adventure. That's the way it's supposed to be, and that's the challenge.
I think that's the challenge, and I do agree with you, and I think that's where people who may have a spiritual longing keep themselves away from, again, some kind of faith because they feel like it's going to have to lock them in to something. And whereas my experience as a person on a spiritual journey is just what you're talking about, that discovery and that openness, and that it's always changing, and that doubt is a part of it, and fear is a part of it. And, you know, being fully human is an enormous part of what this journey is about. And so
we're expected to make mistakes, and I think we're afraid of them so much. Like, I spent a good deal of my 20s fearing a single mistake, as if I could really teeter on that rope, that tightrope, and not fall at all.
So how did you change then? Because you're talking about that as something you used to be, or maybe that's something you're still working on.
No, it's not as bad anymore. I think once you've it was less about being afraid of God and more about being afraid of the people I was around, which is interesting. I mean, I'm still afraid. I'm not afraid of God. I'm not afraid in a sense of I live in fear. I live in awe and respect, and I still want to be doing what He wants me to do. But I think when I came out, it exploded all of the...
When you came out as a gay man?
Yeah. When I came out, I think all the expectations broke to pieces. And I think you don't have to be gay to have this happen. You can divorce, you can do anything that was considered or is considered a boo-boo in Christian circles. And all of a sudden you realize what real faith is, that all of a sudden it's not about following the rules. It's about, okay, now that you've broken a taboo of some sort, whatever it is, how do you interact with God now? How do you interact with your group? And like, I didn't come out like haphazardly, like, hey, I think I'm gay, I'm gonna come out, you know. And I took a long time. I took 3 years to study it because I was frightened to death of it, you know, when I discovered it. And I'm such a strange case, not having any clue for so long. You know, I was 34 when I figured it out. So 34 to wait to figure out your own sexuality is, you know, most people take, you know, it's really early that they know. In fact, I have a lot of gay people who go, 34, are you kidding?
Because they were like 12.
Yeah, exactly. They already knew. But, you know, when you're raised in a society, in a tradition that does not believe this is possible, then it's not within the realm of possibilities at all. So when I figured out this was happening, I had to make sure that it was still okay with my faith tradition, because had it not been, I would have become a monk. I would have done anything at all possible to still stay in a good relationship with God rather than get what I want. Because that's what it felt like. It felt like choosing God, which is the higher road, or choosing your base desires, which is what you're made to feel like in church, as if there's a choice between, like, no other sexuality you know, heterosexuality is never called base desires, you know, within a marriage. No one ever says you have to choose. Well, no, yeah. Well, no, yeah, but nobody, yeah. I guess, you know, sex outside of marriage, which is the way it's framed, is couched that way, but not half as bad as, you know, what I have. This affliction.
Yes.
But anyway, hi, I'm Mr. Abomination. I think once you ruined everything, once you ruined the relationship with your church, which is what it felt like, everything took on a whole new meaning. You really clung to God. I had always been buoyed up by my church and people around me because I could always keep everybody happy. I was really good at that. And I think being the son of a preacher man helped because you were always in the spotlight and you were always trying to make sure I watched my family keep everything balanced with the church. And it taught me how to do that too. And I thought that was the most important thing to keep balanced because that was a reflection of my own Christianity, was this church being happy. And so when that all broke, when everyone was upset, when I chose an interpretation of the Bible and of God over the interpretation that my church believed, that's when everything hit the fan. That was a big, hard choice, was to say, I know better, which is hard. But we were always taught, this is your book. You are responsible for the way you live your life. So when it came down to, I felt God was saying to me, I have things for you to do that you cannot do while you're in, while you're hidden. And you need to make a decision really quickly about how you're going to come out, because otherwise, you know, you're gonna hurt and hurt and hurt, and you're never going to move forward. You'll be stuck.
So it sounds like the God that you chose was the God that you experienced, which to me sounds like a loving, forgiving, accepting.
That's the God who is, I think. And I think He deals with each one of us where we are. If we want to believe in the God that is demanding, I don't think... And shaming, I think He works with what's there. And I feel sad that some of us, like I had that concept for such a long time, and I don't think, you know, I changed my God as much as I grew to understand that God was a lot larger than I thought He was. Because we kind of come into these faiths with all the answers. Like, I grew up with all the answers. Every single one of them. 1 through 100, I had down. By the time I was 18 or 19, there were answers for everything. And the older you get, the more questions pop up. And the answers become more strained. And some people, when they realize that the answers don't add up, they dump the whole thing. Whereas I realized, crap, there are a lot more questions and the answers don't seem to fit all the time, but that just makes God more interesting and faith more exciting and more faith. Then, because there's no faith if you have all the answers. If I've got all the answers in an answer book, then there's no, I didn't have to learn anything. I didn't have to struggle. They were all there. And I guess it comes down to whether you approach the sacred book, the Bible, as a book that you already know all the answers to, so you find the verses that match your answers, or if you approach the book as a book that has a lot of cool answers in it, but you have to keep digging and finding, and some of them are new and some of them contradict and some of them stretch your mind. And can you keep coming back to that book and accepting what you read, or do you have to come to that book with boundaries and say, I can only go this far. Outside of that, I'm not going to accept. Like, it took me a lot to come to the book again and say, you actually say things that I always grew up believing you didn't. And it's hard to get other people to go back to the book and go, no, really look. at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. That doesn't say what you think it does.
Yeah.
You know, look at these things so that you can change your mind.
I love the idea that it's a book that's open to interpretation. I love what you said about it being, you know, looking at it in some ways as fantasy. I love the idea that those stories are metaphors, you know, to learn, that we can learn from. I think we get into trouble when we take... well, actually, I love what you said about it's not a great book where if you try to understand certain things through it, like science.
Right.
And, you know...
it wasn't meant to be a science textbook.
It wasn't meant to be a science textbook. And so people that use it like that, of course, they can say whatever they want about... you know, there's no dinosaurs in the Bible, therefore, you know.
Or even worse, that humans and dinosaurs grew up together, and it's a great T-shirt with Jesus riding a dinosaur. That's just great.
Yeah.
But
actually, I'd love to move into not necessarily dinosaurs, but fantasy science fiction, and
sure.
find out how you got where your love for that came in, and as a kid growing up Baptist, how did you reconcile those two worlds, these worlds that you were enjoying, the worlds of the aliens and...
Well, that's just it. You know, if you think of, like, when you teach a kid that he gets to have an interaction with a God, a huge figure that is non-human, that came down to earth and became a human and interacted with us, you are inciting science fiction-ness into them. You are saying fantasy is okay.
Right.
And of course C.S. Lewis, who I also grew up on, my mother used to gather us all into the hallway in between our bedrooms, and she would read to us the Chronicles of Narnia. Slowly, each night we would get a little bit more, another chapter. And I loved those books, but C.S. Lewis used Greek mythology, and I was a big Greek mythology person when I was 7 or 8. I don't know, I memorized all the gods and what they did, and it was kind of cool, you know. And in fact, as a kid growing up, I had a huge, uncontrollable imagination. When I was in 5th grade, I used to believe that I was the king of the winds. And I could control where the winds went, and I would help out soccer games, kickball games, by helping the ball go farther. My friends would come up to me and say, "Could you get the wind to kick it?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I'd say, "Oh, Aeolus, you know, you got to do this," and you know, using the actual Greek names.
And you'd control the wind.
I would, because well, it's funny when you were a kid, like I could spot when the wind was at the top of the trees that it would come down lower. It would start up high and move down. So I don't know if I was just picking up cues, and it didn't always work. I would always, you know, I was a struggling god. I don't know what I was. I believed fantasy was all the time. Like my dreams were I had a lot of lucid dreams. I could fly in my dreams. I could control them. And in real life, I thought that could work. Like I can remember being on the playground, because I used to fly in a ball. I used to like this, and that's how I'd fly around. As a child, I didn't stretch out. I would be like this, like a little ball through the air. So I'd get on the playground, wrap up in a ball, and expect that I would fly. And when it didn't happen, I'd be very disappointed.
Yes.
I walked an invisible unicorn around when I was in 3rd grade.
Excellent.
I did all these... You know, I just thought that fantasy was right around the corner, that aliens were watching me behind the bookshelves, that there was something bigger going on in the world. And then all the stories that I read started feeding into that. That's how I got into science fiction and fantasy, because it was right where I was anyway. And then, of course, you know, the Chronicles of Narnia, a talking lion that represents Christ, but a talking lion, you know, and satyrs and unicorns and centaurs, all wonderful people and things. So all of my stuff all meshed together to where I just naturally wanted to write that kind of stuff. And superheroes. I have to admit, my dad gave me a subscription to 2 comic books when I was just going into junior high. That changed my life. About all of a sudden superheroes were it, because they were super powered humans, you know, humans with a few little, they were like Greek gods, they had one power or another, like they were in control of something. And they were exciting and new, and I had little dolls. I had the Star Trek doll. I was a very big Star Trek fan as a kid, and superhero dolls. They would often work together. So Spock and Batman would always have adventures together.
Good. Did you ever go to a Trekkie convention?
No, I never did when I was a kid. I did go see a wax museum, and there's a beautiful photograph somewhere, I still have somewhere, of my dad and I on either side of Mr. Spock, who is sitting in a chair. Wow. That means a lot to me.
Now, you told me that you consider one of your deepest creative talents to be predicting the future. Well, you didn't tell me about controlling the wind, but no. Predicting the future.
I don't control the wind anymore, you know, that left me at a certain age.
Did it? So tell me about
predicting
that.
the future? Oh, I just had fun. I think it was when CBC approached me to do the 2058, the Yukon 2058, where I had to predict what the Yukon would be like in 50 years. That was so much fun, to sit around and go, what would life be like in 50 years? You know, and try to make it practical, try to make it to where I wouldn't overreach or underreach. I read a lot of Jules Verne, and he was really good at this. I mean, some of his books are scary in the fact that they have elevators and fax machines and elevated trains.
So you nailed it.
In the 1880s. Yeah, so when I was doing Yukon 2058, I was trying my hardest to figure out, well, what's really going to happen? And that was, it allowed a lot of, I liked saying that there was going to be hope, that a lot of science fiction sometimes can be very apocalyptic, or disasters will come out, because sometimes we're trying to warn people away from certain actions they're doing right now. And I just kind of wanted to say, well, let's imagine a really nice future. Climate change is still going to happen. How are we going to adapt to climate change? It can't all be horrible, or we won't be able to live. So what is normal life going to be like, you know? And so I try to imagine, you know, a lot more people in the Yukon and port cities out of, you know, Inuvik, and make it into sort of the Hamburg of its of Canada, you know, where it becomes this sort of international port city. It was a lot of fun, sort of seeing how close I could come. And then what was even more fun is that having them all start to come true was really cool. When I predicted mammoths, and then they finished with the mammoth DNA in Japan, of figuring out how to do that. And then when I won't say the one about the Yukon premier that I had predicted in some sort of a devious relationship with the Alberta premier, yeah, just predicting what was going to happen was kind of fun. Trying to create a better future. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of predicting a future where, you know, we're still trying to figure it out, and stuff is still happening that's beyond our control, but we're still doing okay. You know, we're just we're trying to adapt. We're evolving. We're figuring it out as we go.
I don't. Sometimes the Bible, and this ties everything together, I guess. Sometimes the Bible seems to close off the future in this horrible series of events that are going to happen in the future. And we grew up believing this was going to happen in our lifetime, that 5 years down the road it's all going to be disaster, so get ready for heaven later, disaster now. And I kind of want to change that to where those events could possibly still happen, but can I have some hope in my future too? Can I believe that God is also enjoying our lives with us, and has a little bit longer for us to go, and that we can probably get some things right before all hell breaks loose, so to speak.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So now comes my favorite part of the show, where I get to ask you either or questions.
Oh my.
You ready?
Okay.
Ernie or Bert?
Ernie.
Now that I know you're a Trekkie, Spock or Kirk?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I'm so much more Kirk, but I grew up with posters of Spock everywhere because I wanted to be smart. I was a little too intelligent kid, and I wanted Spock to come down and say, ah, here's somebody that we should pull into Starfleet. As an 11-year-old. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
And Han Solo or Luke Skywalker?
Han Solo.
CBC 1 or CBC 2?
They're both good. Do you have to choose? Yeah.
No, you don't.
Okay.
You don't. Selma or Louise?
Oh, Louise.
Buried or cremated? Should have prepared.
Buried. No way. I like the whole monument. Maybe that's a little bit. That's a bit self-aggrandizing to say, I want a gigantic. Yes. I like the little
tombstone or mausoleum.
Yeah, exactly. No. Tombstone's fine. I don't need a whole house.
And glass half full or glass half empty?
Oh, half full.
Yeah, I heard that very clearly in this. This was so fun. I feel like we could talk for 3 more hours.
I do too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're the only boy that could ever reach me. Being the son of a preacher man.
Oh, that's nice.
Should we sing it?
I don't know enough of the words.
No. Do you want to sing something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Thanks, Jerome.
Thank you, Celia.
This has been Communion. I'm Celia McBride. I've been communing with Jerome Stueart here at Well Read Books.